Unity of Houston is an inclusive church where we seek to understand and live the teachings of Jesus and other spiritual masters. At Unity, we welcome all people from all spiritual paths and every walk of life. We celebrate the diversity of our city and of our world, and we teach love, tolerance, and oneness, seeking to live in harmony with open minds and open hearts.
Wherever you are in your spiritual path, you are always welcome at Unity. Join us and discover that the life of your dreams is already within you. I have 23 minutes to solve world peace. You believe in me? Okay, I'm going to do my best. But first, a joke. So 22 minutes. We have a member of our community who is asked to be nameless, who sends me a lot of little funny things he finds on the internet, and I really appreciated this one. And I have just returned from vacation and gotten back to my healthy eating plan, so that's why I'm sharing them with you today. Dieters are people who are thick and tired of it. I like that. That's good, right? Thick is a good thing with the young folks today. They like that. And the other one is I was in my doctor's office and I saw the BMI chart. It turns out I'm too short. All right. I chose for my title today, Let There Be Peace on Earth. Many of you who attend Unity of Houston or other Unity churches or other centers for spiritual living, you're probably familiar with that phrase. And if I were to say, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me, right? So this song was written not in the Unity movement. Gary creates such beautiful music and for our movement. I've written a lot of songs for Unity and for New Thought. This song was actually written in the 1950s, and it was written by Cy Miller and Jill Jackson. Even though churches in our movement almost immediately began to use it, they also began to change it. And so I remember years ago, I was I was a music director for a CSL conference in San Diego, and I had this idea that we were going to all sing our version of the peace song and just let cacophony rule. And it was actually kind of fun. And if you've ever attended other New Thought communities, you'll find, if they do the peace song, you'll see that our words may be slightly different. So here are the original words. And it's not called the peace song, by the way. That's not the name of it. The title of this piece of music is called Let There Be Peace on Earth. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. So far, so good. Let there be peace on earth, the peace that was meant to be. With God as our Father, brothers all are we. Let me walk with my brother in perfect harmony. Let peace begin with me. Let this be the moment now. With every step I take, let this be my solemn vow. To take each moment and live each moment in peace eternally. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. So I don't mind the changes that we've made, but I think just to honor Cy and Jill, it's just good to hear their original words. The idea of peace on earth beginning in the individual heart and mind is not new. I can't put this down yet. I have more to read to you. This comes from ancient Chinese wisdom, from Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. And if there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. And if there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. I don't know about you, but if I were going to change the lyrics to the peace song, what I might want to do some days is go, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with them. Obviously, they're the ones that are causing the problem. I'm good. I am a peace-loving, unity-attending, high-consciousness, spiritual being having a human experience. Let them do the work, because they're the ones causing all the problems. Let's go home. I think we did it, didn't we? We know that that's not the way it works. I was thinking about this, and Shirley and I were talking back in the vestry before the service. I've been saying this for a while now, and it still feels really true, that I am a very quick study, except about anything that matters. The deepest lessons in my life have taken a long time, and often there's pain involved. And I think that is because the conditioned mind that I grew up with had latched on to false ideas and false identities in an attempt to make a wrong idea of my wholeness. And so those old ways of trying to be okay, which aren't true, but I've been using them in a long time. And for me to really grow and evolve, sometimes it takes what it takes for me to do it differently. And sometimes those old thought patterns and the constructs of identity have to be broken apart by the effects of holding them in mind. It just happens. And it can be slow and long and difficult. Sometimes I wish I could just read a book and have it all done. Somebody write that book and I will pay you. But I was thinking about this idea about let there be peace on earth. And I also remembering that as a kid, last week I talked about growing up Methodist-Costal. I was Methodist and Pentecostal. And how we had a strong teaching about the end times and how the end times were coming. And there's a prophecy somewhere in Scripture that says, and you will know that the end times are near because there will be wars and rumors of war. Do you get it? There have always been wars and rumors of war. Always, even before we had culture and language. Fighting over resources, survival. And so, like me, humanity is kind of slow to grow up around this idea of peace and violence and division. I've been in several groups where the speaker or facilitator would say, if we were just to kind of gauge how, based on a human lifetime, how old do you think humanity is? And almost invariably, we're like an adolescence. We're sort of in the terrible teen years, if you think about us. We don't behave maturely and wisely as a whole. We have many mature and wise people and even institutions and communities, but the whole of humanity is still, in my opinion, just growing up. And it seems to be taking a while. It's not on my timeline. I would just be happy if the people driving on 59 freeway would grow up a little bit. You know, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with them. But here's the thing. When we sing it, and I want you at the end of the service today, as you sing it, see if you can embody it in a little bit different way. Let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. What can I do today in my family, in my body, in my church, in my workplace? What can I do to be more mature and wise in my interactions with other human beings? There's a perception, too. We were talking about this briefly. Steven Pinker wrote a wonderful book 15 years ago or so called The Better Angels of Our Nature, where he had done all the research. And even though we think of the 20th century as being one of the most violent times in human history, 2 world wars, urban violence, all sorts of things happening, statistically, it's the safest time in the history of humanity to be alive. Least likely to have a violent act visited upon you in the 20th century than in any previous time. That's not what we perceive, is it? Yeah, interesting. So now we're going to go to a little bit of good old new thought, metaphysics. Consciousness is cause teaching. Stay with me. Peace is already here on earth. Peace is already here. But not everyone on the 59 freeway knows it yet. Michael Beckwith says that God doesn't solve problems, but in God consciousness, problems are dissolved. Can I say that again? Yes. You might want to pay attention this time. You might even want to write this down. Michael Beckwith says, God does not solve problems, but in God consciousness, problems dissolve. The peace of God is eternal. It is omnipresent. It is, you can't harm it. You can't hide it. You can't destroy it. It is just reality. It underpins everything. And yet, because we have gotten some wrong information individually, as a family, as a culture, as a species, we don't know it. Sometimes we know about it. Mary Morrissey often teaches about that. She says this: when you hear a spiritual principle and somebody teaches you something and you go, oh, I know that. She says this: unless you fully demonstrate and manifest this principle in every area of your life, you really don't know it. You know about it. And so what we're talking about here is lived, practiced, and embodied knowing of the peace of God. There are three things that I learned in my recovery story from the recovery community that I'd like to share with you. These are simple ways that I began to know it a little bit better. The first is there is no justified resentment. Are you resenting me now for even saying that? Yeah. Resentment is holding someone as wrong, not doing anything about it except being mad about it. Just sitting on that mad. Just sitting on the injustice of it, not moving into action or seeing what my part is, just holding on to it. There is no justified resentment. Doesn't mean that people haven't wronged you. Doesn't mean that people haven't committed great injustices in the world, but to hold on to resentment, to blame others for our condition is a dead-end street. It will not bring you peace. What we offer in this teaching is freedom comes through willingness and responsibility. You must be willing to let go of your lesser ideas, to step into higher ideas, and you must be responsible for your own experience. The second thing I learned that I thought was valuable for me, that still is this. Helps with the resentment thing. They're not doing it to me. They're just doing it. Have you ever heard that? They're not doing it to me. They're just doing it. What do I mean by that? What does that mean? It means that people are acting on their own pain. The pain that they got from their families, who got it from their parents, who got it from their parents, who got it from their parents all the way back. So whenever we see a situation where people are in either psychic or verbal or physical violence with one another, the pain did not start there. It goes back and back. And so even though it may look like they're doing it to you because they're saying it to you, they're not. They're acting on their own pain. They're not doing it to me. They're just doing it. And when I can move into that consciousness, then the little sliver of possibility of peace in my mind opens up. That I can begin to get out of that cycle of blame and victimization. They're not doing it. Maybe you should repeat after me. Repeat after me. They're not doing it to me. They're just doing it. All right, that one's free. And the third thing that I learned in recovery, which I think is really helpful to this conversation, is just a way of being. They told me just to keep my own side of the street clean. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin where? With me. Take care of my actions, take care of my words, take care of my way of being. And I know blame is a lot of fun. It's just so much easier. If they would just act right, I'll be fine. It's never the solution. And I see it, I know that, and I want to thank Norma Green. Where is Norma? Is she out back there at the table? There she is. Our Norma Green, who just spearheaded this idea that we need to be registering people to vote in our own church. And so that happens today. Thank you, Norma. And it is so easy in election cycles to get sidey and tribal and we're on the good side with the good people, they're on the bad side with the bad people. It's real easy to do that. And I do encourage you to vote your conscience and your values. I'm not going to tell you who that is. You determine who that is. But what I've learned and what I've observed in our political climate right now is that we're not going to blame our way out of this. Yeah, they can be as wrong as you want them to be in your mind. That doesn't really help much. Someone has to be the one to say, let there be peace on earth and let it begin with me. Not them, but with me. And so that's the work. That's why, and here's the thing. If you define peace on earth as a cessation of all violence at all levels, in all quarters, you may not see it before you breathe your last breath. You might. I don't believe when you come into the consciousness of the presence of God's peace that it is a global transformation of human nature. But when you become more peaceful, humanity grows up a little bit because we share one mind. We are all part of the consciousness of humanity. So we're all doing our bit to lift and raise human consciousness. So the work that we do is all here, right? My consciousness. Peace begins with me. So it doesn't matter what you do, or does it? Is my relationship to you does it even come into the conversation? Well, it absolutely does. The way we interact, that's where peace gets to show up. Mother Teresa of Calcutta, she said this, if we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten that we belong to each other. If we have no peace, it is because we have forgotten we belong to each other. When we were creating our belonging statement, that phrase came in, and none of us remembered where it was from, but our statement is, what is our belonging statement? I shouldn't have said anything about it. Anybody remember? We create a spiritual home for all people, knowing that we are one body and that we belong to each other. That's what we seek to do. And when that phrase, the drafting committee on that, we really liked it. Although for some it didn't feel like unity, because I'm responsible for my experience, not yours. So when I say we belong to each other, is that really unity? And we decided that it actually is. That if we begin to move with a deep understanding of our interconnectedness, that demonstrates unity in a far greater way than just me taking care of me. So it's a both and. Jesus of Nazareth, I shared last week that for my entire life I've been taught by his stories, his healing stories, his parables, his wisdom teachings. And as I came into this teaching, I had to kind of relearn the way that I looked at some of it, not from a dualistic perspective, but from a wholeness, non-dualistic, unity perspective. And he told a story. Well, actually, before the story, and this is in the Gospel of Luke, if you look at the narrative, at the story, he and his disciples were passing through Samaria, and it was late in the day, they'd been walking all day, and they asked for hospitality in the Samaritan village, and they were denied. You see, the Samaritans hated the Jewish people as much as the Jewish people hated the Samaritans. This was an old divide. And by the way, Happy New Year to all of our Jewish brothers and sisters. Yesterday was Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur is coming up. And so when they left the village and they were tired and angry and frustrated, those dang Samaritans, the disciples came to Jesus and says, do you want to call down fire and destruction upon that village? I think it's a good idea. Let there be peace on earth, and let it begin by getting rid of them. And Jesus declined. And then the next thing that happens in the gospel, according to Luke, is that a wise man in the law, a lawyer, asked Jesus a question. He said, what must I do to inherit eternal life? This is in Luke chapter 10. And Jesus, as a good rabbi will do, answered that question by asking another question. He said this, what is written in the law? How do you read it? And the lawyer answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, with all your strength and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. And Jesus answered, you have answered correctly. Do this and live. But the lawyer wanted to justify himself, so he asked Jesus, and who is my neighbor? And Jesus replied, a man was going down from Jerusalem to Jericho, and he was attacked by robbers. They stripped him of his clothes, they beat him and went away, leaving him half dead. A priest happened to be going down the same road, and he saw him, and he passed on the other side. So too a Levite. But when he saw the man in need, he passed to the other side. But a Samaritan, those dag-nabbit people, doing it all wrong, believing the wrong things, worshiping the wrong way, mean to us. So when Jesus said, a Samaritan, as he traveled, came to where the man was, and when he saw him, took pity on him. He went to him and bandaged his wounds, pouring on oil and wine. He put the man on his own donkey, brought him to an inn, and took care of him. And the next day he took out 2 denarii and gave them to the innkeeper. Look after him. And when I return, I will reimburse you for any added expense. And Jesus turned to the lawyer and said, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? The expert in the law said, the one who had mercy. And Jesus replied, go and do likewise. This was a radical and offensive story to the audience. I don't know who it is. Who's the last person in the world you would want to find you if you were lying by the side of the road? That's who this is. They're the good ones. They're the hero. The people that you struggle with most in life, they're the ones that Jesus said, it's not about whether you believe right. It's about how you show up in this world. Barbara Brown Taylor, in giving her sermon on this, she said, Jesus didn't care about the Samaritan's beliefs or how he worshiped. It was his actions that mattered, the way he demonstrated his beliefs into the world. And then we know in Christian teaching that we're justified by faith, not by works. So evidently, Jesus was not a very good Christian. That's supposed to be a joke. Jesus was not a Christian, if you didn't know that. Here's the thing. Our beliefs do matter. But if we really believe it, if we really know it, it will demonstrate in our actions. If we truly believe in oneness, we will show up differently than people who don't believe in our interconnection. And this is the challenge. This is the part that growing up can take some time. A few weeks ago, Reverend Stacy Collins gave a beautiful teaching, and a brief part of her sermon was on the pearl of great price. And she was saying that in that story, it's one of the short parables of Jesus said, the kingdom of heaven the kingdom of God is like a pearl of great price. And when the pearl merchant found it, he sold all that he had that he might have it. To live truly in this place of non-duality, of oneness with God and with each other, we have to give up some things, Stacy taught us. Old beliefs, old ways of being. And I would add to that, we also have to give our willingness, our actions, our gifts. We've got to be willing to give who we are into the world if we're going to live the kingdom on earth. It's a big job. And I know sometimes, I wish we sometimes just had that old dualistic, let's blame them. Let's make somebody else the scapegoat for humanity's problems. But unfortunately, you find yourself in a unity church. And we are the ones responsible. We are the ones who are being called to live this truth out into our lives. And I don't want you to feel heavy by that. I don't want you to feel like I'll never live up to it, because you will fail. I will fail. Probably 59 is closed, so I'll find another place. I do every day. I struggle to live my belief and my truth. But here's what I find. I'm a slow learner about things that matter, but I do learn. Because it matters, I'm willing to keep showing up. I'm willing to keep coming to the practice. I keep coming to the classes. I keep coming to the teachings of great masters around this. I keep coming to it again and again. And time after time, I'm given opportunities, and sometimes I fail the test. And every so often, I had a little Jesus moment. I wanted to call down fire and destruction, but I didn't. I remembered that they're part of this thing too. So we celebrate the growth. I love what Ricardo said. If you don't want to be hugged, that's fine, but just let the alegría show on your face. I had a friend in recovery. One day I was coming into a rehearsal with him. We were doing a concert together, and he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "I'm fine." He said, "You might want to tell your face." But I was in the fundamentalist, the Metacostal tradition. I was told that some days I would be the only Bible that people read. And some days we may be the only unity that people ever get to see. We're the only spirit that people get to see. Would you pray with me now? Thinking of the words to Gary's song that Ken sang. We are ready to heal this hurt, ready to rise up and heal this hurt. In our own small way, and just in the part that's in front of us, the place where we are currently feeling it, this human hurt, this sense of separation and lack. Something's missing. We anchor this prayer in the deepest truth that nothing is missing because God is the great reality and God is everywhere present. The light, the love, the power, the peace, the beauty of joy of God is here in me, in all of us. And so what we are seeking to do, what we are praying for peace in this world, is that we may remember and embody this truth of incarnation, this truth of possibility and transformation, that we may be willing to step out in faith and be that light in more situations, in more of our conversations, and knowing that as we do so, people respond, that there are others who will lift us up when we have fallen down, and we lift others up when they have fallen. Together, we are rising up, ready to heal this hurt. Let there be peace on earth. Let it begin with me today. In gratitude and in grace, we let it be, and so it is. Amen. Thank you so much for being a part of this work we do at Unity. Just your presence here you're helping to raise the vibration, raise the consciousness. And if you would like to go a little deeper, we've got lots of opportunities coming up for you, spirit groups, classes. Become involved. And if no one has told you today that they love you, I love you. Thank you for watching this message today. I'd like to invite you to join us in person here on campus at Unity of Houston for Sunday morning or Wednesday evening services. If you can't be with us here on our campus, you can still join us live on Facebook or on our website, unityhouston.org, Sunday mornings at 11 a.m. Central.